All right, so I'm actually filming this after I filmed everything else that comes after this because I got everything filmed. I'm like, I didn't even introduce myself. Okay, so a lot of people who are watching this probably already know me, but just in case you don't, my name is Daniel Poppie. You can actually find out more about me at danielpoppie.com. But I am an author. I live in southeastern Wisconsin, and I write books that are, I guess, similar to fantasy, but I would not say they're fantasy, right? Some of them I say, hey, this is in the fantasy genre, but some of them I'm like, yeah, they're similar enough that I'm like, they're like fantasy, but they're not always fantasy. So that's all. Again, if you want to know more about me, check out my website, danielpoppie.com. It'll be somewhere on the screen. I don't know where it's going to be exactly. All right, so hello everybody. I am just here because the launch of my first mystery book is in 5 days. So August 1st is when the launch is happening. And I'm just here not just to talk about, I'm going to talk about the book, but I also want to talk about my writing. And my goal for this is really to give you enough information to make you know whether you want to grab a copy of this book and try it out. Okay, if that makes sense. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is kind of like how I approach writing. And I've been thinking a lot about why people read stories. And I know that when I looked up why people read stories, I saw things like entertainment, fantasy, different things like that, escapism. And when I look at myself, it didn't really jive with why I thought I did. And maybe it's the case that people are applying labels to why they read something, but I think it's really a different thing. I think there's something else happening when people read stories. And I think that people read stories for the same reason that people end up traveling a lot. And I think the reason is that it takes you to a different place. It allows you to experience something new. In some ways, when you travel, you get to experience a whole new world. And I think that storytelling does that as well. Because when you travel, not everything is fun. Not everything is good. In some cases, you might get mugged. In some cases, you might have to sleep out on a train platform, whatever. But in other cases, it's a lot of fun. So it's a mixed bag of good and bad. And stories bring us to really high heights and break our hearts sometimes. And it's not just escapism, because we are experiencing real emotions when we are going through reading a story or watching something, whatever way we're taking in a story. So I was just thinking about that, and I think that's why I read books. That's why I read fiction, and I think it's really cool because you get to be transported to a place that is completely different in some cases than your own world, and you get to do it from the comfort of your own bed with whatever hot beverage you prefer. So I've been thinking about that, and when I think about that in relation to these books, that is kind of what I'm trying to do. Every book I write, I'm trying to make people, bring people into a different world, and I do that in a different way than some authors. And I do that actually, so some authors will explain everything about the world and they'll give you every little detail. And I think there's value with that. I do it a little differently. So this is a mystery story, and the way I do it is connected to how I've been working and what I've been interested in throughout my life. And it's also connected to this idea of mystery. So throughout my life, I've been interested in things that are fuzzy on the edges. So I've been interested in ancient civilizations or the movement of people through history, or things that are out of place in history or out of place in time, and folklore. And all these things, at least as far as I see, all these things have fuzzy edges. If you think about history, if you really know how we study history, even a little bit, you realize that we're taking bits and pieces and we're trying to, in some cases, construct a larger whole. You know, if you're digging through the dirt and you find things in the dirt, you're not finding a tablet with the history of that civilization. You're trying to put together how people lived, what they did, how they interacted with one another, what were their religious rituals, etc., whatever it is. So all these things, ancient civilizations, folklore, whatever it is, have a very fuzzy edge. And I love that fuzzy edge. And if you read anything else of mine, that I'm really invested in, you'll notice that there is a fuzzy edge to what I'm writing. I'm not giving all the information. And I like these because they're never fully revealed. You always can wonder more about what they are. And that kind of brings me to this story. So when I was planning for this set of stories, what I was doing is I was trying to engage with stories that had kind of a fuzzy edge. I was trying to engage with stories that had kind of a cloak of darkness thrown over them. So when you if you are at all interested in checking out this book, when I looked for places for inspiration, here are some of the places I looked. I looked at the graphic novel Watchmen. I looked at the Batman comics, especially the very dark ones from the 90s. Edgar Allan Poe, Lovecraft, Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. There's a few other ones that I can't really think about right now, but all these are, to me, darker stories. They're usually set at nighttime. They're usually set in a situation where you can't see everything. They are similar to horror in a way because they're dark and we don't see everything happening and we can't see everything happening. But that's what I tried to do. So I tried to bring in that, I think you'd call it an ethos, into my stories, that feeling into this story when I wrote the story. And that's my intention with all these stories. My hope is that there is a fuzzy edge to what I'm doing. And the reason I draw from these stories is because I want my stories to be fantastical in some way. They're not fantasy, right? There's a fantastical element in some cases, but they're not necessarily fantasy, okay? And they're not written like fantasy at all. They're more written like a noir book or a dark Gothic literature from the past. So this is what I'm going to tell you about the plot of the book. So the main character is named Arthur Cowell. And he is a materialist to a certain extent. He believes there are gods, but he does not believe the gods interfere with things happening on Earth, and everything that happens on Earth can be explained in a logical way or through a scientific way. So he goes out to find clues for a brutal cold case. Man, if I can talk. He goes out to find clues to a brutal cold case that happened 6 months ago. And when he is looking in that place where the body was found, he finds a stone. He finds a small stone. It has writing on it. And when he goes to a friend of his to determine what that stone is, the friend of his tells him that the stone is actually ancient and it's connected to a specific game. Okay, so Arthur Cowell, like I said, is someone who does not believe in things out of the ordinary happening. Everything can be explained logically. And this stone starts a journey for him that makes him question whether his ideas about the world are actually true. Now, you might have a few questions about the book, so I'm going to address a few here. And if you have any more, you can always ask them as this week progresses. So one question I've gotten is, how long is the book? The book is about 35,000 words, which is on the short side. So if you get an average Agatha Christie book, it's going to be somewhere from probably 40,000 to 60,000 words. If you don't know who Agatha Christie is, she writes these little books. She's written about 1 million of them. They're these little books, and they're little mystery books. But this is shorter than that. So if you are someone who is pressed for time, it's not going to be a book that you feel like you need to slog through. You could actually take a few hours on a weekend and you could quick finish the book. Or if you are someone who doesn't actually read very often, this is a book that's going to make you feel like it's going to make you feel really good, because you're going to think, how far am I through the book? Oh, I'm 75% of the way through the book. Wow, that went really quickly. And it does have a full story, so don't worry. But at the same time, I did write it in a way. I intended it to be a shorter book because I wanted people to be able to quick pick it up, read it, and then they can go on with their lives. And they don't have to feel like it's a task they have to do. They don't have to put it on their to-do list. It's just something they pick up, they read, and then they go on with their lives. Another question I've got is, where am I going to release the book? So in print form, if you want a physical copy of the book, it's going to be released on Amazon. As of now, that's the only place that it's going to be released in a print form. If you want a digital copy, it's going to be on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. If you are like, hey, I want a digital copy, but I don't have an e-reader, don't worry. You can actually, if you're just like, I want to try out the book, but I don't want to get a physical copy, I don't think that's something you need to worry about, because if you have a smartphone, you essentially have an e-reader. All you need to do is go on to whichever platform, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, whichever one it is, and you download an app, and you can read books from that app. I went to Europe with a guy Europe with a friend of mine, and he read 4 books on his phone while we were in Europe. I'm pretty sure it was 4 books. So if you do not have an e-reader, you can still get it for a cheaper amount and get the digital copy if you're worried about that. What's my next question I had? So yeah, again, if you want a physical copy of the book, you'll definitely be able to get a physical copy of the book. I'm going to make sure that you are able to get it. Everything is in the works toward that goal, as well as the digital copy as well. So the question that arises, if I'm releasing it so quickly, you might have the question, are you self-publishing? And some people have a stigma toward self-publishing. So I'm going to actually explain this a little bit more. And it's not something people often know. And I'm going to actually explain this in a backwards way. So if I go through regular publishing, if I go through the regular route of a traditional publishing, this is how it goes. So let's just say I write a book in a year. And then after I write a book, I need to find an agent, right? That's the step I would take. So I need to find an agent. And then after the agent, I'm going to be the agent is looking for a publisher for me. So I take a year to write a book. After I take that year to write a book, then it might take me about 6 months to get an agent. I would say I don't know if that's average, but I would say that's reasonable to say 6 months. After the agent gets my book and says, hey, we love this book, it might be 6 months, it might be a little longer that takes to happen. Then the agent is going to go out and going to connect to publishers and be like, hey, I've got this book that you should publish because it's really great. That's how it works. So let's just put that on 6 months as well. So from the point I started writing the book to the point I finished and then got an agent and then got a publisher is 2 years already. And then there's going to be around a year or so. It might be a little less, but it's probably going to be around a year where that book goes out. It's going to get published. It's going to go through the different layers of that publishing company. And it's going to take a while because it has to go through so many people's hands, right? And that's 3 years before the book actually gets released. Now, even if I took away a year and everything went really well, I got an agent in 3 months, I got a publisher in 3 more months, and then I got it all published in 6 more months, that's still 2 years from the point I started writing the book, right? So it's a very long process, and I am sending certain books I have out to agents because I think that the lifetime of that book will be better for those people. But I'm not sending all my books out to agents because I like being able to release things very quickly, and I'm also I like being able to control what's in the books, and I like being able to control the covers because I have no control over the covers. I don't control anything in the book except the contents of what's in the story. But this, I get to connect to people who are graphic designers. I get to connect to a copy editor. I get to see the bigger picture of publishing as well. And some people probably have this attitude that, oh, if I get a self-published book, it's not going to be as good as a traditionally published book. But it really depends on the person putting out the book. Because if the person putting out the book has an intention to put out a final polished product, then then the book is going to be a lot better than if somebody doesn't go through that process of trying to make it as good as possible. So what I would suggest, if you have any concerns about the book, is that you actually just pick up a copy of the book, right? Pick up a copy of the first book, and then you can see. And you can see if it's up to your standards or if it's not. And if it's not up to your standards, you can say, I don't want to anymore. If it is up to your standards, then you're like, hey, you put out really great stuff, and you are doing it all by yourself, and that's really great. I also really like the fact that when you go through self-publishing, you actually get more of what would I say? You get paid more based on the sales of each book, and I get to actually set the prices of the books as well. And if you don't know, I think that right now, if I put out a book and I went through through traditional publishing, I'd get about 3% of the profits of each book. That's something people don't know. So if you go through a self-published author, more money is going to the author. That author, if you support self-published authors, that author is going to be able to work for themselves based on their publishing faster than if they went through a traditional publishing. My gosh, I can't even talk. So again, if you're worried about that, I would just suggest grab the first book, check it out, and then if you don't like it and if you think it's not up to the standard you want, then you can always just not read the rest of the books. That's fine with me, because I want people who like the books, who appreciate the books, to read them, of course, and everybody has different preferences. So that is the last of my questions for today. On Wednesday, I'm going to be sending out another video similar to this. I don't think it's going to be as long, so don't worry too much. And I'm also going to be revealing the title of the book. So if you want to know what the title of the book is, go to that. You can watch the video, or you can just listen. It really doesn't matter to me, but you can get the title of the book at that same time. So keep your eyes open. Again, I'm going to be sending out that video with more information on the book, more information on my writing on Wednesday, and then answering some more questions as well. For now, if you do have any questions or comments, please, if you're on a social media, comment them down below. If you are seeing this through an email, right? If you got this through your email, check it out. Then you can actually reply to me if that's the easiest thing, or you can comment to me on one of these social media posts as well. If you don't want to miss any news about this, right? If you're like, hey, I want to keep in touch, I want to get updated about what's happening as we get closer to the launch of the book on August 1st, then you can actually sign up for my newsletter. I am going to have a link. Depending on where you are, it is either going to be a comment or it's going to be in the description. So look out for that. It'll be very obvious what it is. So check that out. If you want to keep updated, then you can sign up for my newsletter. And again, tell me your comments, ask me your questions, and I will see you on Wednesday.